I'll welcome Tim here, who just joined us. Thanks for coming to with this month's monthly pop-up. The topic this week, as Randall said, is high-performance teams. Randall will be presenting today. Randall has founded several successful startups, held a long-time position at a Big Four consulting firm, and was a senior executive at an American public company, author of 8 books, and is in the Speaker Hall of Fame here in Canada, and he works with me at the Brain Trust Professional Institute, helping organizations scale their businesses. So Randall, what do you have to tell us about high-performing teams?
When I talk to groups about high performance work cultures, and when I speak to CEOs, executive directors about the same topic, I think there's a recognition by at least the more mature ones that you don't just press a button and magically you have a high performance work culture. And what I wanted to do is in our time today is really just speak about maybe a bit of a life cycle approach to what the heck that actually means, and maybe give you a few cues as to how you might be able to build this in your own culture. And first of all, what I'd like to start by talking about, if we think about the life cycle of an employee, and I know certainly if you come in as a leader, you have what you have, and you've got to sort of form that to what your particular vision is. But if we look at it from an employee's perspective, their first touch point is when they think, I think I might want to work here. Or maybe a recruiter, touches them on the shoulder saying, this is a place you consider work, right? And if we think about the employee journey from that point, okay, the first interview, for example, the first conversations, the offer letter, the onboarding, the first day on the job, the first 30 days on the job, at every single one of these points at the very beginning, especially before they're actually on the job, what's happening? They're observing, they're not idiots. They can see what's going on, and their expectations are being set one way or the other. Now, before we sort of delve into that, I think it might be worthwhile to explore the term, what the heck does a high performance work culture actually mean? And you speak to 10 leaders, sometimes you get 11 definitions. So I'll sort of describe what it means to me. Number one is that there's no hiding in the reeds. Everybody's there. There might be a purpose that might be strong and might be weak, but people get things done, and people get things done strategically. Things are mapped out in a way that it's very clear that what you're doing makes a difference to whoever the particular stakeholders are. You do it collaboratively. Okay, it's not here's the leadership and here's the team, and the high performing has to be over here, and the doing nothing happens to be over here on the side, etc. So it's really everybody sort of leaning in to actually make things happen, and the results of this certainly have an impact on productivity, and it certainly has an impact on retention, certainly has an impact on engagement, but it also has an impact on and the culture. It also has an impact on things that might not be so evident. For example, like innovation, or the ability to adapt to change. All the AI that's coming in right now. Are we adapting to that change, or are we being adapted by it? A high-performing work culture is one that flexes and gets ahead of the curve. Why? Because they're actually performing, as opposed to being performant, if you will, in whatever they're actually doing. So back to with that as kind of an overall definition, back to the question of each of the touch points a prospective employee has, okay, before they're hired, and the key onboarding and call it first 30 days on the job. Because at that point, when they're hired, they've got the set of expectations, and in that first 30 days, they're locked in. They're actually locked in. So if you're able to deal with setting the expectations, then the question is, and by the way, isn't it interesting? So often there's an HR function that manages the recruitment brand. There's an AR function that manages the process. It may be an external organization that does the recruiting and some of the screening and everything. Expectations are being set. And so the words, high performance work culture, or what the culture actually is, defined, is sometimes being set not by the person who's actually managing and their their skip manager, the top leader, but it's the people that they've had in contact through the process. So in that first 30 days, it's a question of, okay, what do we do now to make sure that what gets locked in is consistent with the expectations set that were set before hiring. Okay. I think, if we think about the touch points, by the way, it's not just these interviews, or it's not just the first day on the job, but what's the job description look like? Okay, what does the recruitment page on the website look like? If somebody knows somebody already in the organization, it's very easy to figure that out through LinkedIn. What are people saying about the organization? And all those things sort of speak to those expectations setting. And then it's a question of onboarding. No, we have a whiteboard paper on how to onboard and what we think are some of the best processes. If you like, reach out at the end. We could share something about that and you get some idea. But on one hand, it's okay, what's the job and who do you work with and so on. But my question there is, during that initial onboarding, is everyone giving a consistent message, or are they getting different messages from different people? Okay, they speak to one particular colleague who's out at a branch or who's working remotely. Do they have a different view as to what that work culture actually happens to be, right? Do they understand when they speak to their manager what the general expectations are with respect to how the person works and how they interact with other people? Is there a connection with the mission, vision, values that are sitting up at the very top, and actually how people are actually acting, or is there this discontinuity between the two? I think all these things make a big part of how those expectations are landed, and the most important thing I think is really that interaction with the manager, the direct manager I'm talking about, and if the manager doesn't live the culture that the organization wants, then it's very hard for the direct report to say, okay, that's what I should be modeling myself if I want to be successful. Now, I will say that it's a challenge because the CEO, the executive director, leader might model a certain thing, and you've got this kind of middle management that sort of is unaligned, if you will, with it. And then you've got everyone sort of below the front lines who are doing their best, but they're not being managed. And I share this because, not to say that, the middle management group, and depending on the size of the organization, it may just be one level, it might be several levels. Very often what's missed, and certainly in my grandfather's and perhaps my father's day in the 50s and 70s and earlier, I guess, people had started a company and they'd stay there for their entire career. And when somebody, became a manager, they went to the new manager's course. Or when they became a director or VP, they were sent off to do this training or that training. But there was a definitive idea that we're planning for people's succession and career, and that's our job as the organization. And we know that's not the case. I was in a meeting yesterday, and the stats with respect to the sheer number of people who are considering actually leaving their job at any particular time was astounding. The December 2023 survey from, I think it was McKinsey or Deloitte, I can get the details, I'm sorry, essentially said 30% are considering leaving within a year. Okay, and if most organizations, you get a sense, at least from the younger people, that they're here for a couple of years. And certainly in the tech space, for example, most people are there for 2 years and that's it. Okay, and so for me, where maybe I'm showing my age, but I like the idea that people can progress through and feel that if they're making a choice between in and out, that they can actually stay in and there's a place for them, right? Yet, on the other hand, very often when the organization doesn't sort of keep up their part of the bargain, okay, what's an employee to think? Now, let me just ask this. If you think about the middle management group, how much of an investment has your organization? I don't mean to make anyone feel uncomfortable, but how much of investment has there been made on management training, for example, for that particular group? as a normal kind of thing that happens every single year. What typically happens is a frontline star performer gets promoted into that management role. And as a result, oftentimes the organization misses the performance from that star performer, but they also then get a manager who's not experienced in actually managing, other than perhaps osmosis from all the people that are around them. And it's a shame. Now, obviously, some people are stars, they can grow into that role and they could do it by themselves, right? But not everybody is that way. And it's not reasonable to expect that everybody in that middle management tier would actually be aligned with how they manage without some degree of consistent message reinforcement and experiential understanding of what different types of management styles, tasks, techniques could actually be used. And it's in the olden days we used to call this management training, by the way. We still do actually. But for whatever reason, there's a lot of organizations that don't do that. So in the question of, well, why can't we have that high performing work culture that we so desire and that we think everybody wants? Sometimes people don't know how. I'm talking about the managers. I'll also say sometimes the leader doesn't know how either. Why? Because it's very hard sometimes for a leader to actually have some good conversations about what to do, what about this, what if that. A leader might not want to go to the board and sort of ask some questions that the board would expect that the leader already knows. Okay. Or maybe the leader's got some halfway figured out ideas and they don't want to go up because it's not really ready for prime time. It needs some baking time. It needs some more depth. Sometimes you don't want to go to your direct reports as a leader because they may have some bias or they may not be happy with some of the thoughts that you're doing, right? Well, then you can say, well, surely we could just send the leader off to Harvard or a place like that for some advanced management training, which, by the way, a lot of these executive education programs actually run, and they're very good. You can go there for a month and you can do the program, but that takes you out of the job, and that's just a one-time kind of thing. So for a leader, sometimes the best way to sort of solve that problem isn't by going to management training, but it's actually to have like a performance coach, a business coach that actually works with you along the way, right? Because that can sort of help fill that knowledge gap in a practical kind of way. And same thing with the front lines. They don't know kind of what the culture should be or where their place is because they're getting messages from many different places that might be in conflict. There's that one frontline person who's a bit of a problem. So there's messages from there. There's the keener boss who is really pushing you to work. Okay, but you've got all these, life challenges that you've got to sort of deal with at the same time, kids and parents and whatever else, etc. And you're getting just pressure there. And you've got somebody else, gee, their job seems to be very easy. They're not working that hard. And all these different things coming in, and you're wondering, well, what does high performance mean? What does it mean? How does it have an impact on me? How do I grow as an individual by exposing myself to all these different experiences that would then let me be a stronger contributor or move into a more senior role, right? So they sometimes don't know as well. So typically we'd say, well, that's what the annual performance appraisal is for. A key part of the building a high performance work culture. The problem is that if you sit down once a year and say, well, here's your objectives and here's kind of how you did compared to last year, and we've got a couple other soft things that we'd like to talk about, that's good. And then more progressive organizations say, well, one second, we need to have a half year touch base, just to make sure we're tracking in the right way, right? Well, in the consulting world, there's a very true statement that very often clients will say, and it's, well, what have you done for me today? Right? You have to continually, as a consultant, as somebody who's serving a client, you've got to continually demonstrate that value. Otherwise, they say, why are we paying you? So it's an interesting thing that this exact same concept is so important in the employer-employee relationship. It's not a question of, gee, millennials need constant buttering up, otherwise they won't perform. It's not that. It's just that very often, most people need some recognition that what they're doing is on the right track. They need coaching and support to make sure that they can lift themselves up to the standards that they're being expected to achieve. They need to be held accountable, not just once every 12 months or every 6 months, but on a far more frequent basis, formally through appraisals and some of those things, informally, okay, through more frequent, but still done basis. And good managers know that, even in the olden days when it was just performance appraisals once a year. In Search of Excellence, one of the first really big business bestsellers, made the expression management by wandering around. Okay, a phrase. You wander around, and that's how you can manage people, and that's how you can give them some recognition or coaching or whatever it is, right? But nowadays we've got people that are working remote. Okay, just earlier today, I heard a story about somebody looking for a job, and they asked for some help. Can you look at my resume? And what a surprise! While they're supposedly full-time employed somewhere, they actually had on their resume that they were double dipping here and here and here. Well, this is not what I call the rudiments of a high performance work culture. I call that an example of a manager not knowing how to get the best out of their employee, to give them the experiences that they need so that they feel fully engaged in what they're doing and have some degree of job satisfaction. I'll put aside the ethics of what I just described for a moment, but I think that the part of the work culture is setting expectations, holding people to account, rewarding them. It's not just a question of here's a bonus for doing what I said, but it's a question of saying yes, you did a good job, and recognizing that people appreciate being appreciated. So I think this, it's a virtuous cycle. You do well, you get recognition from your managers, you get from peers, from senior leadership, from people out in the industry, which makes you feel good, which makes you want to do the same kind of thing, and which then causes the cycle to continue and to continue. So I think that's part of it as well. I think I'll just, I just want to take a few more minutes on just a couple other elements of building a high performance culture. What happens if you're building a high performance culture and the systems and the processes that you have are crappy? Okay, there's just no other way to say it. They're crappy. They cause a lot of frustration. You have people speaking to, if you're in the membership world, association world, and you've got a membership coordinator speaking to one of your members, oh, just hold on the phone one sec. Our crappy system is so slow, I can't bring up your information, right? They might not be saying that out loud to your members, to your clients, but they'll be thinking that. And as soon as that attitude, sort of goes in, we have really awful systems. I cannot do my job to the level that I want, etc. And they usually will never spell it out precisely that way, right? It makes it hard. If you've got systems that don't foster the particular work culture attributes that you want, it's like pulling and pushing, inhaling and exhaling at the same time. And so sometimes building a work culture isn't just a question of management. It's also taking a look at the processes that management has put in place, number one, and number two, the technology, the systems that are in place to make those processes efficient. Now, is there any, one other thing, just looking at my notes. A new leader comes in. The organization is merged with another. There's a massive change, COVID, for example, or any other kind of like societal change. These things are really, really important because every organization's culture, and specifically when you're talking about building a high performance work culture, is you're either growing or you're declining. You're going towards it or you're moving, you're slip sliding backwards. And you could put in place all kinds of things that can help. I'm really, really thinking particularly, the coaching, performance coaching for the CEO, or management training for that middle group, or specific functional skills training for specific roles. And I'm thinking particularly oftentimes in marketing, which is sometimes outsourced to outside people as opposed to building those skills internally. But when there's an inflection point, that's an amazing opportunity to say, hey, we've got an opportunity to do a reset. The new CEO or executive director starts, they've got a vision that's different. New strategic plan, oh, we've got to do something differently. Oh, we're changing a system. Well, the culture that's around, we've got an opportunity to do it. Oh, we're merging in, we're divesting, whatever it is, we've got an opportunity, folks, to do something different. And those things are often, oh my God, you miss the opportunity to sort of, pump a whole bunch of adrenaline into the organization and cause things to happen. There's no management retreat. There's no town halls and kickoffs. Obviously, most of the time there are these things, but they're not planned in a way. They're not, and there's no alignment. There's a kickoff or a management retreat, and then you go back to the same old, same old. There's a big announcement, a new branding, but there's no changes of behavior that go around it. There's a whole bunch of promotions to new roles because you're merging, or that you're, a whole bunch of, whatever the HR changes are, but there's nothing else that sort of goes around. There's all these disjointed messages that might be good messages by themselves, but there isn't that alignment that creates the culture that'll make a difference. Rania, to you?
Yes, this is a topic both Randall and I are very passionate about. I certainly always have additional questions for Randall, either looking back on my own experiences or working with our clients. If anybody has any questions, feel free to jump in. You're welcome to turn your mics on and join. If you don't have any questions right now, I'll get us started. And if it jiggles anything for you, you can jump in. Any questions from the group here? I have a question.
Shoot.
So within any organization, you have people of all kinds of skills and capacities and aptitudes and appetites for learning and different appetites for ambition. And you need people of all different levels to fill different roles. If everybody's scrambling to the top, who's staying at the bottom? What does it mean to have a high performance team when everybody's, at a different level and capacity? What does that mean? We can't hire only hungry hunters.
So I think that's a great question, Rania. Thank you. This is the beauty of these pop-ups, because I had no idea that she was going to ask that question, but it's a good one. And I'd like to answer it in a way that perhaps you might not have thought I'd answer. There's a lot of talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I want to focus on diversity for a moment and recognize that everybody has got an opportunity to add some value because they come from a place that's different. So diversity doesn't mean all the usual things. Of course it does, but it also means different levels, different functional skills, right? Different life experiences, different geographies, beyond the usual diversity, dimensions we have. So, for example, I've been a CEO in a number of organizations over my career, and I assure you that I have no idea what's going on at the ground level, because I'm not talking to people on the ground level every single day. I'm talking to people who talk to people, right? And so what is it that I can add in terms of what's actually happening with a very specific client compared to, say, a project manager who's working every day with that client, who understands, or a on the ground person who's doing a very specific function, right? So a culture, high performance work culture, I think maybe we misnamed it. Maybe it should have been high performance work and team culture, because everybody's got a role to play. And I think so long as the leaders are able to provide space for all the voices to chime in, and allow people to lead from behind, not just lead from in front, okay, it's a lot more powerful.
I'll acknowledge the comment here that Nicole shared, and I'll share my opinion of it, and Randall can share as well. Nicole shared, I believe that leadership is about action, not position. Everyone can be a leader in the sense that they can contribute to the success of a team, even if they're at different levels. So for me, Randall, I'm sure I agree with you completely in the same sentiment, Nicole, but I would call this like individual contribution. The fact that somebody's doing a great job contributing in their role, I don't think that means it's synonymous with leadership. You have individual contributors who are not leading, but they're drivers.
Yeah,
You see it differently, Randall?
I think I think it's a question of some semantics. I agree with you. If you ask some of those people, they say, yes, I lead the, and then they name the small things
The
that they're
tool that they use
responsible
at work.
for, and their manager did a great job in helping them become a steward of that particular thing. So exactly what you said, Rania. Donald Cooper said there can be no high performance without clarity from the top. Now, I couldn't agree with more with that. I think that when that the leader is muddled, the next level gets muddled, and then by the time it's said, and the problem with muddling is it doesn't get muddled at the third level like anywhere else. What ends up happening is everyone fills in the blanks with whatever they think is the thing that should be happening, right? Nature abhors a vacuum, and organizations that don't have a clear leader. Now, let's be clear, it's not an authoritarian leader, although some authoritarian leaders seem to be very successful. It's a question of saying, hey, the board has a strategy that the leader is being part of crafting, and this is a direction that we're all going. And because we're all going there, everybody, no matter what your particular job and role is, you should be able to help us move towards where that is. If the leader is one that's very driven in that way, everybody will pick up on it. If they're muddled, though, they'll fill in the blanks with whatever. There's no alignment or anything. So many great ideas can come from the bottom up, but clarity can only come from the top down.
I have my
Yeah,
next question, Randall.
take it
I'm
away.
hungry. I'm hungry for it.
What's the question?
Um, your presentation, more than suggests that it's, management's responsibility, like the performance of a team is the tone and clarity, as Donald said, by the management. How come, where do you see the balance in terms of finger pointing towards employees when managers says we're gonna flip this one out, this one's not performing? Like,
Uh,
like it's like a chicken and egg situation, right? Like, how do you?
So I think there's stuff that does bubble up. Okay, whether it's ideas or whether it's that narrow leadership in particular domains and everything. I also think that to Nicole's point, it's a question of communicating the vision to the team. So I think it's coming from both sides. But I think that can I harp on the question of alignment for a moment? Um, I think sometimes that when the leaders have this alignment, okay, and then they decide that they're going to um, how do I say this in a non-patronizing kind of way? Um, if, for example, you decide that you're going to send people to the local business school for an executive education, okay, to learn about fill in the blank, a very particular thing, right? Then you're going to decide that you've got a bunch of people that are going to go somewhere else for their education, and they get a certain message over there. And then what you do is you say, well, we're going to have lunch and learns, and we're going to bring random people in, and we're going to be doing a lunch and learn, cheap and cheerful, and we're going to do it that way. And gee, you know what? We're going to expect people to do some professional development on your own by reading business book. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. And so what ends up happening is that every single person in the organization is getting different messages from different sources saying different things, okay? And then the vision from the top is somehow bringing it all together? No, how could that be, right? Surely the kind of professional development you do every month with your people. Okay, surely the coaching messaging that's going on with the C level, with the most, surely the functional skills courses that people have, why wouldn't you find a way to actually have them have an aligned message, right? And so I know I'm sort of straying a little bit, Rania, from your question, but I think it's the question of what are the processes to make sure that that vision from the top actually does get down, and so that the experiential development of your people can allow that vision to cascade downwards, but also so that even at the lowest level, when they get that training, for example, it's consistent. There's some congruency. And it doesn't mean you have to do it all yourself. I mean, there's other ways of doing it too. So,
Yeah, no, I think there's definitely wisdom in that. I have questions. I have questions about utilization. Okay. When you think, at least when I think of high performance teams, the papers are flying and people are walking around the office and high fives and lots of things happening and, lots of busyness. And maybe maybe I have the wrong impression of what a high performance team is. At least our clients have very busy offices. What is the appropriate utilization of a high performance team, especially in service-based companies? You have spikes, you have peaks, you have crunch times, more clients, it's busier, and then you're asking your employees to work overtime, and like that's not sustainable over the long term. So what is the appropriate utilization, and how do you keep
oh
it
man,
stable?
gee, I wish we rehearsed these questions beforehand, Rania. So
Everyone, you should know I try. I say, Randall, I'm going to chase you down to ask questions before, and we don't, and then he gets this live question.
yeah, so what I'd say is it's no more stark, that question, in the professional services world, like accounting, law firms, consulting firms, because it's very clear. They sell hours. Excuse me, they sell hours, and at the lowest level they've got to be 80%, and at the manager level they've got to be 60%, and the partner they've got to be 30%, and X% doing business development. So it's no stark there. Like it's very, very stark there. What I would say is this: a high performing team is not papers flying all over the place. I love the analogy, but it's not papers, it's not pandemonium. Oh my God, chickens with their heads cutting off, running around the office, getting stuff done, lots of smoke, but no fire. High performing teams are ones that actually take the direct route to achieving the strategic goals of the organization. And they do that efficiently. They do that in a way that develop the people for greater. They do it in a way that addresses all the other stakeholder needs. They do it in a way that improves engagement and retention. They do it in a way that doesn't burn people out, right? And I think that the fundamental thing that when you think about some of our clients that are going like this, okay, it's let's tame the chaos here. High performance team does not mean craziness. On the other hand, I don't want anyone here to think that it's kumbaya time, right? And I think I mentioned this earlier on. The fault about between kumbaya and papers flying like crazy, okay? People, managers will go to one side or the other when they don't know how to manage. And they'll happen one versus the other when there's not that clarity at the senior leadership level, when people feel. When I started my career many years ago, I was doing I was working at a big four firm, and thank you very much. Success was consulting, and success was measured by what time you got in the office. And the managing partner, his office was right by the front door. So you could not go into the office, this is one of the big firms, without passing his door. And he would look up, morning, Randall. Okay, then you go to the desk. Okay, and thank you very much. 12 hours later, because you start early, like at 7 a.m. or so. 12 hours later, oh, Randall, are you done your work? At 7 o'clock, you're leaving, right? And if you didn't put in that time, And I think that we had a bit of a reset with COVID, where managers all of a sudden realized they couldn't lazy managers couldn't manage by the number of hours people are sitting at their desk, but for some, the very first time, they had to manage by what actually got done and at what quality that got done. And some of them had no idea how to manage because their entire careers, they weren't managing. They're watching the clock to see who was sitting at their desk, right? I'm being a little dramatic here, but you get the idea. And I think that what's the root of this? No management training, okay, no coaching, okay, just let me figure it out because this is the first time in the entire history of the world that we've ever managed. We've tried to build a team that's doing what we're supposed to be doing. Okay, no, it's got to be in that middle. And I think that, you know, as people sort of come in and out, it sways a little bit one way or the other. But we need to tame the chaos so that we don't burn people out and that we've got focus for the time people are spending doing the work. And we're not doing a kumbaya where it's a nice place to be and it's like a leisure, it's like a leisure job. No, you're being paid for your expertise to accomplish something that will help us achieve our strategic goals.
I want to pull what Casey and Nicole said into the conversation. Casey says here, Rania, that's the exact opposite vision of what I have for a high performance team. So I think just to make myself clear here, I'm not saying that a high performance team is a frenetic, chaotic place, God forbid. But my question specifically was, what is an appropriate utilization so that it's not unreasonable to expect people to produce higher or longer or work faster during crunch time, right? It's just not sustainable to ask them to employees to produce and work far hard, whether it's the annual conference or whether it's new clients or whether someone is out sick with their loved one and you have to fill their shoes and do two hats for a short period of time, right? So what is the appropriate utilization so that you can make those asks without burnout? And that's sort of my question.
Yeah. For me, Rania, just saying you answered it actually in your question itself, right? I think it's very astute. You answered it, right? It depends. And a good manager knows and has the judgment to sort of say, hey, listen, I think we've got a utilization problem here. Okay. Or I think we've got an underutilization problem here. Right. And I'd hate to say what the number is. I like to think that you know, we're all adults here. Okay, and you've got a job to do, and it's the job of the manager to make sure it's filled up. It's the job of the staff member to say, "Hey, I need more. I can handle more," or "Gee, I'm too overburdened. I need some help here." And sometimes not overburdened, but I haven't done this before. Am I doing it the best way I can? And everything. So
I'll bring in, sorry, I'll bring
go
in
ahead.
Nicole's comment here. She said, I've heard that in high performance teams, the members genuinely care about each other. If they do not, the team can't deliver performing. I'll tell you a personal story, Nicole. I have an uncle that I'm close with, and I had a boss that I got along very well with, and I called my uncle up and I said, I think I'm in love with my boss. And my uncle said to me, that's so fantastic. You're going to work so well together. So I had my uncle's blessing to be in love with my boss. And we did great work together. So I agree. I'll go to my next question. We've all heard people, different, idiisms or, expressions around management. So you hear people say, spend more time. I'm looking over here because my notes are here, guys. Spend more time with your high performers than your not high performers. But at the same time, your newbies, your green employees need more mentorship and more time to upskill, right? So if you're supposed to be investing in your high performers to keep them close, as you said, 30% are looking to leave their job at any given time. How do you juggle that time allocation for different employees?
Okay, I think it depends on the size of the organization. Okay, it's really a good question because how you do it in a large financial institution or a national or global organization is different than if you do it with a medium-sized organization or a very small one. So let me just answer in a couple general ways. First of all, high potentials. This group needs to be identified. And in my view, you need to provide them very specific path, and they've got to be part of that conversation as to what that path is. You could handle them as a cohort, okay? You could put them through things as a cohort, but those individuals, they've got a future. You want to keep them. So identifying those ones, that's one part of it, and putting together a plan. The newbies, to use that word, the new hires, that's a different group, because programmatically, you can say, here's, before you start, here's some pre-reading, here's some videos, here's some this, here's some that. Okay, you can give them a buddy at the very beginning. You can put them through an orientation program, even if it's just watch a video, or hey, we're going to go through a bit of a PowerPoint, you and I, or our group, or whatever it is. You can, so for that particular group, I think it's also a question of realizing that everybody is on an individual trajectory, and what they need to be satisfied from a career and job perspective is going to be different. Some people, for example, are very upwardly mobile, let's just say. They're looking to, and they're hungry to do more, in which case you can give them more, right? And you also have to give them, the coaching and, the training and all that kind of stuff as well. But they're keen. Other people, on the other hand, I don't want to say it's just a job. They want to do good at their job, but they're not looking to get a promotion a year. They're looking to do their job and not that much more. And what you expect of them, and what the role needs and what they need, that's also a bit of the conversation. So I think that in small, medium-sized organizations, you can't do everything programmatically. You've got to think of the person and the role and the needs of the organization. When you're a little bit bigger, at one point in my early in my career, I was working at IBM, and I was in marketing, and they had identified me for whatever reason and said, would you like to get an exposure to another part of the business? So I said, actually, yeah. And I said, what side of the business? So I had a secondment there for several months. I've seen this in a number of other places where you could use things like secondments, or temporary transfers, or shadowing, or a whole bunch of other techniques to sort of help broaden the experience. I think it's also a question sometimes of saying, okay, there's a concept of a stay interview, having a number of questions and a discussion with a lot of your people, saying, hey, tell me why you want to stay here. Okay, this isn't a job interview. You're not going to fire them after the stay interview, but understand from them, what is it about what you've got that you like, particularly when we think about a high performing team. Okay, what are the parts of that team that they recognize are good? And by the way, maybe they've got some ideas as to how the team can be even more high performing, or the culture overall that team sits in can be more high performing.
Okay. I don't want to hog Randall here. If anybody has questions, please come on mic and jump in. But okay, related to that question, I have another question, Randall. I have worked for organizations several times where they expect a peer, another colleague, to effectively mentor and be on call to new hires. Is that appropriate, or is that like lazy, cheap management? Like, is it the manager's job, or is that an appropriate peer
To tell you,
participation?
I hate to say, well, it depends, but I love the idea. Okay, but the loving of the concept and how
Who loves the idea? The manager that doesn't have to manage, or the employee that has a day job? Who
No,
loves
I
it?
love the idea. I love the idea. Okay, and I'll tell you why I love the idea is because sometimes you don't want to go to your boss to ask a certain question, yet having a peer who kind of knows the ropes, or knows where to get the paper clips, or how to do whatever in the system or whatever, that's something that's good. It builds relationship. It starts the team off, etc. So the concept is excellent. The concept is excellent. However, the execution is often where it falls down. Okay. So if the manager if the idea is that I'm offloading my management to a peer, not appropriate. If the person who's the buddy, the peer, is not sort of fully in tune with this high performing culture, the mission, vision, values, all of the things that are part of the organization, if they're not attuned to that, you'll be imprinting something that's wrong, right? And finally, for the person who's being the peer, the person who's being the buddy, the person who's doing some of the mentoring, who's mentoring them? If they're giving, shouldn't they also get? Right? And so sometimes we think these concepts are great, and they are, But to put them in place in a way where it'll stick and make a difference, I think it's more than just, aha, we're going to get a peer, a buddy for everybody who's a new hire. Okay. By the way, one way of doing it is to say, listen, the expectation of the buddy is during the first month, this is such and such. And then after the first month, it's a little bit different. Okay. And gee, if that peer, the buddy, gets promoted into that new role, guess what? Maybe they'll have a buddy for 1 month in that particular role as well. But we have to make sure that it's a little bit more holistic, not just a simple tick the box and magically things will happen, because that's not realistic.
Thank you, Randall. Next question. If it is indeed the role of a manager to upskill and mentor their employees working under them, it makes good sense wherever possible to have them having done the role of the person that they're mentoring, that they understand the role. That's obviously not always doable. And we have volumes and volumes of Dilbert comics to talk about that very disconnect. But can you speak to that? Sometimes there seems to be this huge gap between management and employees. There seems to be this huge.
Yeah. And you sometimes want that. Okay. And and Dilbert notwithstanding, and I think Dilbert is hilarious and on point so often. But if, for example, you've got somebody who is a manager of X, they presumably are an expert at managing, but the actual task of X, for example, that person might need some very specialist skills. And it may be that the manager knows how to ask good questions, but doesn't know all the details that the functional specialist might actually have. So, for example, a marketing manager might not know all the minutiae of social media, just to take an example, or email, deliverability. I'm talking about some things that are very specific because the individual contributor might have all those knowledge, but the marketing manager would know how to ask good questions, even if they don't know how some of these things different work. Gee, they've never been on TikTok, on Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is. They know this is important. Somebody else has got all those skills. So that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is this. Maybe the manager should get some training, right? Maybe that manager can be a little bit better if they had some functional knowledge in whatever it happens to be, right? And just to sort of rely on the excuse of, well, I've got somebody who does that for me, I don't need to know the details, is a bit of a cop-out. Sometimes it's true, but I think sometimes it's too easy to say that it's true rather than actually doing it. Okay, listen, manager, invest in yourself, and invest in yourself, not just out of an ego perspective, but in terms of whether it's learning how to manage or whether it's some of these functional skills, so that you can actually ask better questions. If you don't know what questions to ask, it's very hard to be a manager, right? It's hard to keep people to account if you don't know those questions to ask. So, Rania, thoughts?
Thoughts? Thoughts, lots of thoughts. We could talk about teams and management all day. I have a question about teams. The idea of a dysfunctional work environment, toxic work environment, complacent work environment, all these people that are thinking of leaving or whatever. How are these environments able to persist and exist? Everything is in the open now, social media, people can review workplaces on Glassdoor. There aren't a lot of secrets. LinkedIn, you find out about the work culture there. How are they able to persist? Is it that people don't know better or haven't seen better or think it can't be done? They think it's just a mirage?
I think sadly, part of that is the case, precisely. But I also think there's a couple other sides that I really wanted to unpack. Number one is the idea, my grandfather started as employee number 37 or something at a company called Chrysler, way back 110 years ago. and he retired as a senior VP, employee 00000000113 or something like that. That never happens anymore. We know that. So perhaps some companies have got to, organizations have got to move to a mindset of we've got to compete for the minds and for the mindsets of the people that work for us, and we have to assume that people will be here for 2 years, then there's going to be a change. The only question as a leader you should have is, will the change be within our organization, or will the change be outside? Right? So if we start thinking about retooling how we work with our people in that way, we might sort of be more cognizant of where we need to invest in our people and how. That's one thing. The second part is really the crux of your question, which is there's a yucky work environment. How in the world can we change that to a high performing work environment and work culture? And the answer is, let me tell you, you can't without change. The CEO who's ultimately responsible for that has got to go, or they've got to get some help, right? Because they may not know what they don't know. I've certainly in some of my CEO coaching, there was some aha moments with a number of CEOs where they thought, I never thought that was important. I totally see it now. I know what to do, right? Sometimes there's a little bit of rot within the organization that's spoiling everything and is sending some countervailing messages. And in those cases, it's a question of saying, okay, for that particular person or group, is there what's the cause of it? Do we need to swap out a particular manager who's not aligned, is no longer aligned? Way back when in my career, I was a senior manager. It was in a marketing department, actually. And there's this one person who was responsible for a group. And everybody was saying, Randall, you have to fire that person. She is terrible. She is caustic. She causes problems. Nobody wants to work for her. None of her employees staff wanted to work with, and blah, 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 blah. But, I noticed as her manager that she was unbelievable with numbers. So in this particular case, it's, well, how might we find a role within the organization where she would actually make a difference? So we made that change. All of a sudden, she's everyone's best friend. Okay. She was a million times more satisfied, right? She no longer was sort of spreading all these negative vibes and shutting down ideas and frankly taking away from the team. She was actually adding to it. So I think that there's a certain part of the managers. Sometimes you can't do that. You just got to make a swap, right? But sometimes it's putting the same person in a different role. Sometimes it's setting the expectations and saying, okay, and maybe even performance improvement plan on the way out. But very often you look the level above, that's where the problem is, not with the actual person.
I want to acknowledge that we're coming up on the hour. I want to thank everybody for coming and for participating in the chat and your questions. If anybody wants to talk about this topic more with me, with Randall, we're happy to talk about what a high performance team at your organization might look like, or any things we can clean up in terms of process, people management, all that stuff. I'm happy. I always have more questions. I always have questions. We typically go over about 10-15 minutes with additional questions here for people that still have ideas bumping around in their head. But I want to acknowledge here this question from Nicole, and it actually speaks to a topic that came up in our offices here. So I'll just read what she says here. Nicole wrote, here's something that resonates with some and is incredibly offensive to others. When leaders refer to their employees, their team members as family. Do you advise people to do this? So I'll share my thoughts. Randall can share his. I definitely can see how it could feel manipulative and maybe not appropriate for me. Randall can share his view. We have a different topic in our office, which is when do we say we, when do we say me, when do we say I? So I do think, how we characterize the team, how we characterize the relationships. I think that there's always boundaries issues. And when those boundaries are not clear, it makes people uncomfortable. I mean, I could talk a lot about this. Randall, what do you think?
I concur. Me personally, I don't like being told welcome to if somebody says welcome to the family in an offhand kind of way, okay,
Like
and
as
then
a
they talk
joke, you
about,
mean?
Well, it's kind of like us as a throwaway. Welcome to the family. And then they talk, all the team members at such and such organization, we work very hard to make sure, blah, 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 blah. And then they never use the word family again. I'm okay with, I guess, that kind of usage, but I don't want to say I'm offended by family, but I've got my own family. This isn't my family. This is my work, and I'm the leader, right? I like to think that there's attributes of family that we can actually bring into the workplace, like respect for others, okay, like being supportive to others. But these are aspects that I see as being part of a healthy, work high performance work culture. I don't see this as being, well, we're going to suddenly make the workplace a family. And I know with some clients where they've worked together for decades and decades and decades, they're their own best friends. Okay, they go to their children's weddings and everything, and in a certain sense, they've become family. But I think that's very different than most organizations where people aren't working together for 30, 40 years. And the term is for me doesn't work. Maybe for others it does, but I agree. I agree, Rania. So
Thanks for your
uh,
question, Nicole. I love any sort of relationship boundary sort of question when it comes to teams. I have a question about stretch goals. This term stretch goals. Um, who do they serve? Like if you have high performing teams and they're busy,
So let me define what I think what I think stretch goals should be. And then I can also, and I'm sure most people here have got an opinion on this, but um as- if I know that the goal is X, okay, and the stretch goal is to do X plus 2, right? I now know that if I achieve X, that's good, but the direction that I should go if I wanted to, be in alignment is to X2, whatever that means, right? Now, if you're in sales, it's very easy. Your quota is such and such, and you've got the stretch goal is that, and you get a higher commission at the stretch goal than the other. So in the sales, that's one thing. But for everybody else, if you're going to do extra, if you've decided that you want to do extra because you want to build personal experiences that have got value to you, or that you love it so much, or because you feel a need to do it for whatever reason, and you can put those extra ergs of effort over here or over here. One of the values of defining stretch goals is it helps people know that we'll have greater alignment if you put them in this bucket, those extra ergs versus over here. So that's kind of what I like about the idea of stretch goals. Sadly, how it gets used sometimes with others is, okay, let's let's get everybody to pump up the whatever the production, okay, and there are sometimes that you want to do that in the world of sales, for example. You might want to do that kind of thing near the end of the year, and put that extra push to get those numbers in, okay. But I think we got to be careful. We got to be careful. But it's still a good idea when done properly.
I'll open it to the room here. Does anybody have any thoughts to share or questions? All of this is coming at you.
I just found it really insightful, actually. There's things I just hadn't really considered. So I thought it was great. I appreciate it.
That's why we do these. That was amazing. Said in one
Yeah.
sentence. Yeah. Okay. Bye, Audrey. Thanks for coming. We'll see you next month.
But why don't we just call the session to an official close? Ronnie, any final thoughts?
I could talk about this all day. It's so important. But yeah,
I
we
think
want to thank everyone for coming. And if anybody here wants to be on our list to receive the emails with the invites for the monthly topics, happy to put you on our list. And we'll see you next month with our learning and development topic. How to get the most out of your learning and development budget.
Donald, I just saw your text. I can't ask live questions as there's construction noise in our condo. So insightful. Thanks, guys. That means a lot, Donald. I really appreciate that. And um,
So we can wrap up
we'll
for today and we'll see everybody next month.
okay. Bye bye.
Bye, everybody.